All right, just some housekeeping. This presentation is being recorded. It's recorded for me to use to improve future presentations. And then if you do want to be anonymous on the recording or chat, you can change your display name on Zoom and turn off your camera. And that will accomplish that. And then if I use the recording for anything, it's just my face and the PowerPoint. Just heads up for people. All right, can get started. Oops. So if you have questions or comments, you can type them in the chat or, and then hold your questions to the end and ask them live, and we'll answer them. This week's presentation is Connecting with Your Child, Communication and Boundaries. We'll go over ways to communicate what you need to those close to you, how boundaries are for you and not for them, ways to find connection when factors limit your options. I am a behavior specialist and a parent. I'm Chelsea, and I understand that life gets hectic, and I help families find what matters to them even when life's not going as planned. And then I have an office in Manteca. I see clients here in my office by video call and in their homes. And I'm an in-network provider with Blue Shield of California, Anthem Blue Cross, United Healthcare, and Aetna. And I have openings in my schedule starting in February 2024. An important note is that I'm a behavior analyst, not a marriage and family therapist or LCSW. So my services through insurance are for clients with an autism diagnosis because that's how the insurance codes work. I also am a vendor with Valley Mountain Regional Center, and that is a little bit more broad in which diagnoses get services. So today we're going to go over and my hope is that this will be a quick and positive way to start the week. Today's takeaways are boundaries, what they are and what they're not, communications, the 3 C's of communications, and then the power of and connecting with our kids. And say less and use thankful statements are what we'll talk about today. Again, questions, comments, type them in the chat. Okay, so boundaries are for you and not for them. When you're setting a boundary, clearly state what's okay with you and then follow through on your own boundaries. And be consistent. Boundaries are consistent and they don't change with your mood. So boundaries might be, okay, hold on, sorry. Boundaries are not for others. They do not need to agree with your boundaries for your boundaries to be valid. And others don't need to follow your boundaries for your boundaries to be valid. It's about how you respond when other people don't follow your boundaries. Your kids get to set boundaries too. And honoring your kids' boundaries will help your kid learn how to describe their boundaries for others. Okay, so next we'll go into communication. We talked about what boundaries are, and then how to communicate your boundaries is next. So keeping it clear, keeping it simple, and it's okay if others don't get it. They don't have to agree with it for it to be something that you have stated and are going to follow through with. Keep it simple and short. And again, it's okay if people don't get it. And consistent. You decide what matters to you and how you're treated, and you stick to it. So clear, concise, and consistent. The power of and statements are that 2 things can exist at the same time. I'm tired and I want to be the one to take my kid to soccer. So it's okay to say you're tired while you're sitting at the field. My kid's in soccer. This is why this comes. I do want to go and watch her play. And I also am tired and I would rather not be there if it's raining, but I'm still going to take her. It's okay that both things exist. I love my kid loves soccer, and I wish practices were not 90 minutes twice a week with 2 games on Saturdays. That would be great too. So, it's not that I resent her in soccer, it's not that I don't wanna be the one to take her. It is okay that I don't love the time commitment, and I love that she loves soccer. And I'm eager to support my kid when they're upset, and I'm triggered by yelling. So, acknowledging our past and our boundaries of I don't communicate when someone is yelling, I'm that's not effective for me, is part of setting a boundary and following through, clearly communicating, and using an and statement. I am, of course, going to want to support my kid, and I can kind of teach them to communicate in a way that makes it easier and more effective for me to support them. So these are examples of boundaries. We can talk about problems in the living room and not in the kitchen. This comes up because a lot of times we're busy in the kitchen. We're making dinner, we're prepping lunches, your attention's not going to be on the kiddo. So you and their problem, and then it's not an effective situation for anyone. You are not going to feel like you're supporting them effectively, and they are not going to feel effectively supported because your attention is divided. So, this is a boundary that's for you, not for them. Maybe they want to stand in the kitchen and talk about it, but in order for you to give them your best, then you can say, we can talk about the problems in the living room, and then you can give the full attention. So, again, boundaries are not for others to understand, but they are for you to follow through with. We can talk about anything using a speaking voice. So if your kid needs it, this goes back to if you've identified that you would like to be spoken to at a normal volume and not with a raised volume yelling, then it's okay if your spouse or your kid don't quite understand that. Maybe they're not triggered by yelling like you are. It doesn't stress them out as much. But if you enforce, okay, I'm available when you're ready to use a speaking voice, that can lead to effective communication because you will be there ready for them and to support them, and you have set the kind of parameters, the boundaries around which you can give the most effective support. I need to know in the morning if you need a ride to a friend's house later. I need more than 30 minutes notice. So you are clearly communicating with your kid. Totally fine if you go to your friend's house. It's totally fine if I need to give you a ride. I would love to do that. I need notice so I can plan my schedule. You've told the kiddo, this is of course for more, preteens and teens, but you've given them absolutely your need will be met, and this is what I need from you in order to effectively meet that need. And then this is one around picky eating. You can have dessert after you eat one fruit. Help me pick which one you want. Um, and then you can't just have candy for dinner is a much more blanket negative statement where if you're communicating, hey, this is the family rule, you can have you have to eat a fruit or a vegetable with dinner, whatever your family rule is. You can help me pick which one you want, and you can have candy after you eat this one thing, but you are clearly communicating what's expected and then offering to help them follow in that. These are all boundaries, and when you follow through with it, you are setting an example that your kiddo needs to or can also have boundaries that other people follow. And when we're talking about saying less, again, they're not your boundaries are not for other people to necessarily agree with or understand, but your kids might want to talk about what's on their mind or ask a bunch of questions. You'll let them guide the conversation even when it's uncomfortable. This, of course, applies to more typical uh, child parent conversations. Of course, this doesn't apply to if your child is disclosing something like abuse or something that you might need to take more action on. This is just for the average conversations. Your child's natural attention span may not seem long enough to solve a problem, and that's okay. The An example of this, my daughters, we in between 2020 and 2021, we lost two very important people in our lives, and she was 4 and 5 years old, and she started to really obsess over death and all the things around death. So we went and got an opinion with a child psychologist because we were quite concerned about why she kept talking about death over and over and over. And the advice that we got has really helped us in the subsequent years of kids are just they ask the question that's on their mind, and if you answer the question that's on your mind to whatever age appropriate level, they when they stop talking about it, they're ready to move on. So it is uncomfortable to kind of leave this open-ended, like, oh, are we done talking about, whatever question it was? But it really worked for us to we didn't oversaturate her with ideas and, overwhelm her with information we thought was important. We followed her lead. And again, the her attention span, she would ask us some kind of jarring question about a funeral process was one that came up a lot, and it didn't really seem like it was long enough to put her concerns at ease, but she stopped talking about it and walked away. And we didn't solve the problem, but she moved on and everything ended up okay. So that piece of advice from the child psych was very powerful in our life, and I've used it across a lot of situations with her to really encourage letting your child talk about what's on their mind and then kind of leaving it when they're done talking, you can be done talking. And then honoring their natural attention span and talking about what they want and offering the simple support is enough. Another way that you can encourage your child to communicate, and again, this is when you've created the space that you are fully attending. So say we're in the living room because we're not talking about this in the kitchen. That's the boundary you've set. You've got your attention on them, and they're ready to now be done talking about whatever they've brought up. A simple way to show that you're available for future talking is saying, "Thank you for sharing that with me." It can feel a little bit silly to thank your kid for talking, but it really closes the interaction quite nicely of, "I valued this time with you, and thank you for saying what was on your mind." Even if it doesn't feel enough or finished to your parent brain, it's even a short conversation about something that happened at school that your kid doesn't seem exceptionally stressed about, but they were just sharing it. And normally you would think, oh, I kind of want to jump in. This happens a lot to me where there'll be a story that my daughter kind of half tells me. And I'm thinking, ooh, that sounds like a lot of bad decisions, all made on one playground. Like, oof. But she's done talking about it, and nobody called me, no one got hurt, so I say, "Thank you for sharing that with me," and we move on. Rather than maybe lecturing on better choices she could have made later, or she could have made to support a friend or to, help with the yard duty, pick up the mess they made, um, that could act as a punisher. It could act as her not wanting to get into another conversation with me later. If every time she brings something to me, I want to have this long conversation about better choices they could have made. And then thanking your child for sharing it with you shows them, regardless of their age and development, that you want to be part of the conversation and that you value their sharing. So sometimes when your child maybe has social, emotional, or language delays, we might not think that they understand the the concept of thanking them for bringing something up. It's still a really good tool for you as well to know that you're closing the conversation in a positive way, and they do absorb all of that. questions and comments. And then wrapping up, each family's boundaries will be different. I myself have I have much more capacity in the morning, and my husband has much more capacity in the evening. So, for, and this is for everything, for noise, for tasks, for talking about things. So, if we need to talk about something, especially regarding a decision regarding our child, we will often call each other in the middle of the day on our lunch breaks because that's kind of the meeting in the middle of when we're both the most effective communicators because I'm very tired by nighttime and he's not awake in the morning, essentially. He's not ready for a conversation. So over the years, the boundary is he does not want a morning conversation. I'm a morning person, so I don't necessarily get that. I don't have firsthand understanding, but I have decided to honor that because that's number one, it's more effective. But number two, he'll say, I'm not talking about that right now. So he enforces his own boundaries as well. And then honoring your own boundaries builds trust in yourself. This is something when we grow up without having the opportunity to have boundaries, or our boundaries are trampled on when we're kids. We don't hold to our boundaries because, as adults, often because they don't feel like they're valid if someone doesn't understand them. So, when you set a boundary, a good example of this is okay, you can come in my house, no problem. Come into my house. You have to use the front door. The side door I keep locked. That's a that's an example that I heard a long time ago that you're not saying no to the entire interaction. You're not saying no to the whole situation, but you're telling the person how you're willing to accept whatever the thing is. So no, I'm not going to talk in the morning when I'm not awake, but we can definitely talk on our lunch hour, is my husband's way of saying you can come in the front door. We can still talk, but the side door's closed. And then honoring your children's boundaries builds trust in you and shows them that it is okay to tell people how they're willing to participate. And it can be uncomfortable a lot of time, especially if we're coming from a parenting perspective of, but I'm the parent, I need to enforce rules. My children need to do what I say. Oftentimes, that's kind of how we were raised, and that's kind of how we think is normal. But if we reflect on that, if we think, would these interactions that I don't particularly love with my parents, those memories of, was I trying to express a boundary and that they didn't listen to? And maybe I want to do things different with my kids. That that is a perpetual conversation I have with myself. Like, why does this feel like this has to happen in this way in my parent-child relationship with my daughter when really the evidence is showing, her behavior is showing this isn't working anyway. So maybe we need to make a change. All right. If anyone has questions, you can drop them in the chat. And then our upcoming session will be in the new year, and it's practical supports for parents. So, Family Resource Network, ABA through insurance, Valley Mountain Regional Center, and local school district services. This will be more of a practical, step by step explanation of each of these services. I used to work at Valley Mountain, I still work with them. I'm very familiar with local school district services. And then, of course, I offer ABA through insurance for that's applied behavior analysis for autism treatment. And so, if you have any families or if you have questions about it, please feel free to attend that. And then we'll go on to the understanding your child's behavior on January 22nd. And that's going to be kind of the basics of behavior, how to figure out the why behind your child's behavior. And then parenting with heart is once we know why your child is acting in a, whatever way might not be ideal, is how to parent them based on their specific needs. And then emotional skills for kids, how to build that emotional resilience and letting them kind of explore their needs in a safe space with you. Thank you so much for joining.